I would have a 3-day week. Yeah, I would absolutely work. I would still. I don't think I would know what to do without working.
I think the object that I have for these sessions is not to convince you not to work.
Yeah.
And it's not even to convince you to work, quote unquote better.
Yeah.
Or quote unquote stronger or smarter.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about that. To me, work is work, but it's about reorienting your life away from work as the definition of your life.
Yeah.
One thing that I found interesting when I moved to Europe was that in the country where we live, people don't ask you what you do, which is interesting. I'm from America, and everybody asks what you do. And what you do also means how much money do you make?
Yeah, yeah.
And people will even ask each other that. Americans will ask how much money you make.
Same as the UK, though. Not like you're saying how much money do you, but the same sort of thing. What do you do? It's the first thing that you say when you meet somebody.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
And the British may ask, where did you go to school?
Yeah, this is a big one, especially in our town. They would sort of go around and be like, well, we went to this place and this place.
Yeah, Americans
Good
don't as much ask where you went to school, but they will ask what you do.
Yeah.
And what you do defines not only your class, your economic status, but your power.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think living outside of it, I got to see that people define themselves very differently when you eliminate the interest in their work. I used to think that Czech people were very sort of post-communist, this idea of like, my work is just my work, and my life is what I'm really about. I used to see that as a very backwards thing, honestly. In my naive, I would say, early, in mid-20s, that's how it occurred to me. Today, I see it as quite enlightened. It's the idea of, I have a job, but my job is not who I am.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. So to me, that's been an eye-opening process, because I think for many people, they see that for the first time. And I mean, this is still a consumerist society.
Yeah.
It's still a class society. It's still a work-oriented society. But there is that beginning of decoupling of what you do with who you are, and it gives us a little bit of a vision of what you could be. Yeah. What we could do instead of jobs.
I mean, I totally agree. It kind of no, I'm not saying this puts me down, but this conversation that we have, it feels like, it's nice to be able to think about it, but is it ever gonna be a reality?
So I think I gave you. I think that I went too deep into the weird minutiae of history, talking about how things change. Well, I should have really emphasized that one of the truths of history is that these changes happen very quickly. The idea, that from children are children to children work in factories when they're 3 years old, that was the space of one generation.
Yeah.
So there was a generation that lived that would never do that, and there was a generation that accepted doing that.
I get your point.
And then one generation later, 1 or 2 generations later, that became unacceptable again.
Yeah.
So these things can happen very quickly. I think it is. I'm not a hope-timist,
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who wants to bright side you and wants to say it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I think that the consequences of what have already happened are devastating to our ecology, to our society, and I'm not sure what a recovery looks like. And frankly, a recovery, if you're talking about going back to the way things were, which is very often what people mean when they mean recovery, that is not possible.
Yeah.
Not only is it not possible, it's not desirable.
No, it's absolutely not. But like the further we get into this as well, the more you kind of want to fucking rise up and kind of start going all primal on these assholes, because it's like nothing that they're doing is working, and everybody fucking knows it. Everybody knows that these cunts are doing everything for themselves, and everybody can see it, and it makes you fucking hate these assholes.
That's why I get quite a sense of like an acceleration going on in, so there are moments in history where things become so obvious and so overwhelmingly apparent that it becomes kind of laughable.
Yeah.
If you go like 10 years in the future, people will be like, I can't believe they thought that would work.
Yeah.
It was like when you look at Henry Ford making the $5 day. Well, you look back on that and go, how did he think he could get away with paying $1 a day when he should have been paying $5?
Yeah.
That's what we think. But at the time, it was like, no, everybody pays $1 a day.
Yeah.
There was nobody saying, oh, this is a great idea. They didn't have the vision.
Yeah.
And I think there are these defining moments, and maybe for the British today, and also for the Americans, the Johnsonian era. We're talking about Boris Johnson, is that moment of like, oh dear God, what have I done? It's your bridge over the River Kwai of a society, going like, well, what did I think? What did I expect to happen? And why did I expect it to happen?
Yeah.
Because you hired someone who told you he was a clown, acted a clown.
Absolutely.
Promised he would act like a clown.
Yeah.
Acted a clown, and was expelled for acting a clown.
Yep.
And as a society, I think Britain has to look at that and think, what in the world did we expect?
Yeah.
And didn't we get what we deserve?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. It's everybody knew. Do you know what? I met Boris Johnson when I was a kid.
You met Boris Johnson.
Hello, well done.
Some tea.
He was, even at this point, I think I must have been, I must have been about 15 or 16. And it was one of my first big paid gigs that my teacher, one of the best teachers that I've ever had in my life, was my music teacher. But I was taught by her mother as well, which was an English teacher. And then I had a bit of music, some other lessons by her dad. So they all do everything, and they're absolutely great people. But she gave me my first big paid job. It was at this gig in her school. But it was like full of like people like Boris Johnson and people like that. And I met him.
Fellows.
Man, he was an absolute goon at that point. I was a child, and I even understood that he was an absolute fucking idiot. And then later on in life, we start to hear, oh, Boris Johnson, yeah, he's going to be the Prime Minister. I was like, what the fucking... I didn't even vote. To be fair, maybe that's also, people like me that make this situation happen, because we didn't vote.
Well, it is a choice. But
of course,
I'm not telling you vote or not vote. It is a choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up. A friend of mine who's from the tri-state area in the U.S., he brings up the Don the Con nickname, right? Which is that if you're from a working class, and it's amazing that the media never really understood this about Donald Trump, even when he became president. At no point did they really understand what he is. And I don't mean that as like, he's so much worse, or he's not worse than what they imagine. He's not a Pol Pot. He's not a Hitler. He's a mafia don.
Yeah.
He's organized crime, essentially. What he did, he was called Don the Con. And he was known among tradespeople, among working people, as a guy who would order work and then not pay for it.
Yeah.
And
Called bankruptcy.
Yeah. There's a planned bankruptcy. There's a
towers and everything.
Yeah, and that is sorry to say, I don't mean to stereotype, but that is a New Jersey, Boston, New York tradition, which is an organized crime tradition of appearing to engage in business and then intimidating and essentially stealing work from people who don't have the resources to fight you.
Yeah.
That is a form of racketeering.
100%.
It's a form of organized crime. And that's what Donald Trump is. He's a mobster.
Yeah.
He's a mobster who never got involved in illegal gambling, who never got involved in, any kind of violent crime. So he's treated differently. But he's really not. He's exactly the same. If you look at people like Tony Soprano, the no work jobs, the no shows, the this and that, the esplanade, right?
Yeah.
That's Donald Trump all over. That's exactly what he is.
Yeah.
He would go in, he would get the contracts, he would get paid, and then he would go over to the workers and he would stiff them.
Yeah.
That's what he would do. That's who he was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't complicated. And everyone knew, everyone on the ground knew. But it had to be something more complex for the media, because they were just completely out of touch with reality, because they couldn't sell that to people.
Yeah.
That's too banal. It's too stupid.
Oh, fuck, right.
And that's why I found interesting this show. Have you been watching this show called Succession?
No.
It's a great show on HBO. Brian Cox plays basically a Rupert Murdoch type guy.
Yeah, I remember you saying, yeah.
What's brilliant about it is that it's all these billionaires, and they're meeting up with other billionaires, and they're doing all their billionaire things. And one of the really interesting choices they make in the show is that all these people are not only horrible, but also crass, filthy, and disgusting people.
Yeah.
Not like mannered. They literally behave like pigs.
Yeah.
Like absolute pigs. And you realize, because a rich person, a multi-billionaire, the way that they behave, that's the way a billionaire behaves.
Yeah.
It gathers this sort of context about itself, which is, if I behave this way, like literally, I'm talking about like these guys are executives in a major media company, and they'll go into boardrooms and be like, sorry, I was jerking off. And it's completely boorish and completely horrible.
Yeah.
But because they're billionaires, that becomes billionaire behavior.
Yeah.
Like high class behavior. It doesn't matter how bad it is. So that's what I sort of felt attached itself to Boris Johnson, was this kind of aura of like, that's just what our Eton people do.
Yeah.
Right? And they're somehow untouchable. It's a very weird, kind of almost mythological sort of creature.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder. Maybe in 10 years we'll look back at that and think, what could people possibly have expected from him?
Yeah.
It
doesn't give me any hope, if I'm honest. It just feels like we're all driving ourselves into a big fucking hole and blowing ourselves up.
Well, maybe we are, but on the other hand, what I hope that you've gotten from these meandering few early episodes is the sense of tipping points.
Yeah.
When things seem to be at their most intense is very often when the circumstances have changed to such a degree that change becomes actually inevitable.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that I think some countries have already got this right. Let's say, who is it? Belgium, maybe France, even to a point. They've got this right. They knew how to do it in the past. I'm not saying like we go in and chop everybody's fucking heads off to the guillotine and stuff, but
Well, this is why I'm not in favor of so-called futurism, because futurism basically is the idea of taking whatever is today and making it sustainable for the future.
Yeah.
Which is not what we actually want, right? Or not what we actually, I should say, it is what we want, but it's not what we need.
Yeah.
Futurism is like, we're going to have cars, but it's going to be Teslas.
Yeah.
That's not a real future.
It's a heading cloud, head up your ass.
That's a bullshit future.
Yeah.
That's a future where your choices have no consequences.
Yeah.
Real future very often is actually based in the past. It's based in things that have already been tried.
Yeah.
And you go through all these things that we're going to talk about, because now we're done talking about history. Now we're talking about today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
And when you talk about today and tomorrow, you realize that almost everything on my list of things that we're going to have to try are being tried or have been tried.
Right.
And they have not succeeded necessarily, or they've not been well recognized, but they have all been tried or are being tried.
Yeah.
And some of them have even worked. Like, for example, we're gonna be talking about the idea of gross national happiness. That is a concept which has been tried and has worked. We're going to be talking about minimum basic income. Would it surprise you to know that the United States has a universal basic income of a kind which has existed since the 1970s?
What?
Yes, it's called the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Right.
It's a credit which applies when an employee, when a lower wage worker reaches a certain income. The government adds income up to a certain amount, and then once you go over a certain amount of income, the addition starts going down.
Okay.
So if you're making, let's say, in the bottom 10%, the government basically chips in another $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year. Quite a bit of money. It's called the EITC. That's a universal basic income module, basically. It's a way of topping up the income of the lowest earners.
Is it like a way to make them go, do you know what, you've got this money now you need to start going above this, and like...
It's literally just a way to get people to consume more.
Consume.
They realize that the bottom 10% of earners, but it's not the bottom, I think it's like the second quintile, because basically the first quintile, they make the minimum, and they're not given anything extra.
Yeah.
The next quintile are low wage but full-time workers who need some extra support so they can consume more. So what they basically do is they pay off their credit cards, which means consumption, or they go on a holiday, So at the end of the year they get this tax credit, and as they start to earn more money, it gets phased out.
Yeah.
But this has existed for 50 years. It's not controversial, and it exists. So my point is, if it works and it's working, and by the way, we call it a tax credit for no reason.
Right.
It is a universal basic income scheme.
Yeah.
We call it a tax credit to somehow justify it under the auspices of a tax system, but it has absolutely nothing to do with taxes.
Yeah.
It has to do with giving consumers enough money to participate in the economy, which we know to be good for the consumer economy.
Yeah.
It works, so we do it.
Yeah.
And this is the point. There are many of those facts or existing schemas where they already work, more or less. We just do them. We don't talk about them in that way.
Yeah.
We don't talk about them as a program or as a way to build a future, but they are in fact already there.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to sort of talk about and tease out some of those things that already exist and how they can be emphasized, how they can be turned into a real program for a different sort of future. And work-life balance, for example, you were talking about that from the introduction. That's one of those things that that concept is already sort of present. It already sort of exists. And even though it's being treated as kind of a joke, one day it doesn't have to be. And it was the same thing with I would think about these things like remote working or work from home. For decades, right? There has been this. My dad 20 years ago was being told, well, soon we'll all be working remotely, and he got one day off a week to work at home because you can do all your work on email, but still he went to the office 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Millions of people suddenly, when COVID hit, were staying home 2, 3, 4 days a week. That's a sudden change, which creates a kind of step change in the value of one idea. Work from home was a gimmick until it wasn't. Until suddenly people realized, hang on, everything that I'm doing at my home is of equal value or better than what I'm doing at the office. So why am I at the office?
Yeah.
And then maybe now this idea of hybrid working and having a smaller office, maybe that will go on and sort of limp along for another 10 years, and then people will suddenly realize that, I don't really need an office. Maybe and then who knows, maybe this hybrid work or this work-life balance thing will suddenly convert people to the idea that you don't need a full-time job. Or that full-time has a different meaning. And in so doing, we can remove a lot of the negative consequences of full-time work,
Yeah.
you know, to us as a society, as an ecology, as a species.
And this is what we need to obviously work towards. I just feel like that's I shouldn't say that's never going to happen, but there's so many reasons why bosses of bosses, the fucking 1%ers, they don't want it to happen, you know, and because they don't want it to happen, it won't happen.
What do you think the other bosses thought of Ford paying his workers $5 a day when they were all paying their workers $1 a day?
They wanted to kill the guy.
They wanted to shit bricks, right? Until they realized that Ford's employees were customers. Once they realized that, everything flipped. Yeah. And by the way, I'm not talking about solutions. I'm not talking about how the market sets you free. I don't think money is an answer to this problem. I actually think it's the opposite. I think that we need to, and we're going to be talking about growth theory more in the next episodes, but I think we need to wean ourselves off of growth as a concept of the future. The economy cannot grow every year. It's not possible. And in fact, we're going to talk about theoretically why it really isn't growing every year. It's only growing every year on paper according to very specific definitions. Yeah. And for reasons which have nothing to do with us being better off or healthier or happier or richer, and everything to do with politics. Yeah. That's already happening. So in a way, you know, when the messaging has to catch up to the reality, you know, when, as I'm saying, and I'll prove this point in a future episode, the economy is not growing every year. The economy is supposed to be, you know, the economists and the government say the economy is growing 3%. It is not. Yeah. It is just simply not growing 3% a year. It's not happening. It can't, because all the growth that it was going to do, most of it has already been done. Right. Most of it's in the past. So you can't continue to add 3% every year. It doesn't work. Yeah. You know, you run out of resources. And what they do is they find ways of, and we'll talk about this, they find ways of calling something growth, even when it isn't. But eventually, once all the policymakers have realized, hang on, what we call growth isn't growth. Yeah. What we call growth is actually bullshit, doesn't make any sense. Let's just move on. You know, then we can get to something productive, you know, a new paradigm. Yeah. But very often those things are already functioning. Those understandings, those realizations already are present and functioning, and people just don't have a name for them. So I'm a big believer in this idea that there are these tipping points. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we finish this time, as we start to talk about the future, I want you to keep in mind the 20-year problem. Have you ever heard of the 20-year problem? So imagine that it's 1980. Okay, you're an average person of 1980, and you're trying to predict what the world is going to be like in the year 2000. So it's handy because we actually have many sources that are making predictions from 1980 of what the world's going to look like in 2000. Yeah. And what do you think the world of 1980 thinks about the year 2000?
I mean, definitely the biggest one was hover cars.
Well,
they think it's going to be futuristic.
They think, basically, it comes down to, they think in the year 2000 the Soviet Union is going to be a bigger economy than America, for example. Right. Yeah. Because the statistics showed that it should. Yeah. Right. They believed. They believed that that there would be a computer on every child's desk by 2000. Didn't happen because the trend. Right. So my point is, the 20-year problem is the idea of predicting the future by taking today and applying the growth rate that ostensibly is happening, the trend that you're being told is true, and actually extrapolating that out to a future. And it's never true, right? Because those trends never last 20 years, right? The number of computers in 1975 was growing geometrically.
Mm-hmm.
By 1985, it was not growing geometrically because it couldn't grow geometrically. It's not possible. It can't keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it stops. It slows down. It changes direction. So by 2000, there was not a computer on every school child's desk. There was a computer in every classroom.
Yeah.
20 years after that, now there is more or less a computer on every desk.
Yeah.
So it happened, not in the way that we anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
But this 20-year problem, it's a framing problem. We think of the trend of today, and we try to predict for 20 years, of that trend.
Right.
So if I asked you, this is 2022, what do you think the world of 2042 is going to look like?
Oh, God.
Better
than this shit.
So what you would probably do is take whatever the trends are right now,
Yeah.
and just add 20 years, right? So you'd say, well, they'll be on the iPhone 35, and it'll have 80 cameras, and it'll have 9,000 terabytes of RAM, and so on and so on, right? Every car will be a Tesla, and a million other things that won't happen.
Yeah. I mean, I probably wouldn't have said that, because as our only fucking things in economy right now, everything sticks the same. They just add a little bit of a, this is better, but it's not.
Oh, you're starting.
Better.
So you're already starting to realize that the futurism is bullshit.
Man, I remember that from fucking years ago, to be honest. I think that's why I'm bored of reality. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people say this is the dumb simulation, right? But the thing is, when people start to realize those things is when things start to really be dynamic.
I don't know. It wasn't good for me. it makes it worse for me, because now I'm like, well, what do you do?
That's what we're talking about. Yeah. So here's my point. If I was going to take a naive prediction of the future, I would probably say, okay, today we're working 10 hours a week more than we were 20 years ago. So probably in 2042 we're going to be working 60 hours a week. Or 70 hours a week. You know what I mean? If the gig economy has been growing by huge amounts, probably by 2042, we'll all have 5 jobs. You know what I mean? Yeah. These kinds of predictions. And what you're already...
It's horrible.
Now, yeah. As I'm talking, you're already going, okay, everything you're saying is obviously going to be subverted somehow.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah. And of course it is, because no one accepts that kind of change. The exponential changes don't last very long. Yeah. The Ubers and the Airbnbs and all these kind of bullshit things, they bubble up, then they disappear. Yeah. Are you going to be carrying around an iPhone 37? No, because they're going to come out with a new device. Yeah. And it's going to be a different paradigm. Yeah. It's not going to look... Absolutely. It's not going to have 80 cameras. It's going to have some different...
a augmented or something.
It'll be some different sensor, or you won't be carrying a device.
Yeah.
It'll be something else, because... the paradigm has to shift. There's only so much progress that can be made in one direction.
Yeah.
And that's why the economy doesn't grow 3% a year. It just doesn't do it.
It makes sense.
It doesn't. It changes.
Yeah.
It's like saying that you have a farm that produces 3% more a year. It simply can't. You might produce a bit more, but one of the things you're going to do is you're going to change the crop. You're going to diversify it.
Yeah.
You're going to change the way you do it. Something about it is going to change, but it doesn't mean that it's simply going to be more like it is now.
Yeah, it's like how what you predict fucking weather patterns are going to be like.
Yeah. So the idea that we're going to be working 5 days a week 20 years from now, simply because you have never known anything different, is denying the fact that, at one time, 150 years ago, 70-hour weeks were common for children.
Yeah.
For children.
Yeah.
And today you find that unimaginable.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it possible that in 100 years from now, people are going to find it unimaginable that you worked 40 hours a week, that you worked 5 days out of the week? Why would you work a majority of your days?
Yeah.
It won't make sense.
Yeah.
What will you be doing with that time? That's what we're going to be discussing.
Yeah.
But it's very important to start to get that gestalt switch of like what you think is normal, what you think has momentum into the future is illusory. The things that you think are stuck and will just continue to get worse, they can't get much worse, right? Boris Johnson, you can't have another Boris Johnson. Not only because you won't accept it, but there literally can't be someone worse.
Yeah.
Or if there is someone worse, the things that they will do are so bad that the system will necessitate a change. And when the change is instantiated, it will be in a reaction to that extreme aversion.
Yeah.
So things are not going to just get worse in a predictable way. They're going to get worse in unpredictable ways.
Yeah.
Some things 20 years from now are going to be worse that you wouldn't even imagine should be worse.
Yeah.
Right? There just will. There will be other things that you would think today are definitely going to be worse, which will be better.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting point. You know, like we should never see the future as a version of today. The future is not a version of today.
Yeah.
That's why I like to call futurism like this, you know, this artificial sweetener for shit, because it's not. It's today plus space.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way of looking at it. It's nice.
Today plus space.
It definitely helps you think about it.
Yeah, but look at it this way. If you think that Elon Musk is going to start a Mars colony in 2050, right? No. And the reason is because Elon Musk 10 years ago was worth $200 million. Now he's worth $200 billion.
Yeah.
10 years from now, he cannot be worth $200 trillion because there aren't $200 trillion. So, and there aren't going to be $200 trillion. So that change, you know, we were talking about how the majority of change happens before the switch, not at the switch. That's the point. A lot of the change that has already happened, a lot of the change that has already gotten us to 3-day weeks. Think about this. That's already happened. A lot of the things that need to be in place for 3-day weeks to happen are already there.
Yeah.
And we're actually 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
Right? So think of it like that. We're closing on the end of the cycle.
Yeah.
We're not at the beginning. So don't think of us as like just starting. What we're really doing is suddenly waking up and almost there. Just like, you know, when we were talking about how, you know, climate change is so radically accelerated in our lifetimes. Well, that's an interesting and an important point. You think of, you know, all that time before, that was us getting ready to fuck up the world.
God, yeah.
But it was us getting ready to.
And people they've gotta fucking believe it now.
Yeah.
It is just so obviously slapping a dick in your face.
But this is a problem of history that that last 20%, that last 20 years of us really fucking the planet.
Yeah.
That has to happen for us to realize that the 50 years before that of people saying this is going to be bad turns out to be true.
Yeah, exactly.
And what ends up happening is that the solution has already presented itself by the time you acknowledge the problem. We already understand what we have to do in order to stop what we are currently doing.
Right.
So I suppose I'm trying to give you a little bit of hope, not optimism, because things are going to get worse
100%.
before they get better, if they get better.
I mean, it's more of a, this is going to be good in your kid's lifetime.
Or think of it more like this: things are not going to be ever the same as they were, but you're not going to mind the difference as much as you think.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, you know, I also think it's based on you as a person as well. If you can do something to make it happen, then, you know, it's there. But sometimes you're like, well, what else can I do to make that shit happen? You know.
Well, I mean, some of these things are it really just understanding what's already gone on. The thing is, like, you know, if the middle class 70 years ago could expect in their lifetimes that they're going to own 2 homes and 3 cars, right? The middle class today cannot expect in their lifetime that they will own 2 houses and 3 cars. But that doesn't mean that they'll miss them, right? It doesn't mean that they want 2 houses and 3 cars. They'll want different things.
Yeah.
They'll want things which are realistic for them.
Yeah.
And that's the point. You know, we were talking about serfdom. We were talking about this the other day with our colleague Lindsay. And one of the things that came up was, you know, people weren't free. And I pointed out, you know, if you look at the way that serfs lived their lives, they had a kind of freedom, which was freedom from expectations. Their life was the same one generation to the next. They were not expected to change. They were not expected to challenge themselves. They were not expected to be better or worse. So in that sense, they had a freedom from expectation.
Yeah.
We can't say, I don't want that type of freedom. I don't want to be expected. I don't want nothing to be expected of me. But we do have to respect and understand that to them, that might have been valuable.
Yeah.
Because that was their lived experience.
Yeah.
And we should never look at someone's lived experience through our own value set and try to judge it. Because our value set will evolve for our experiences and our circumstances. And it may be, I for sure don't want to own 3 homes and a boat, you know, or even 2 homes and a boat, or any boat.
But that's coming from a guy that already owns 2 to 3 properties anyway, so...
And I think that I probably overshot, you know. And I think that life is telling me that I overshot. You know what I mean? That I was
Not really.
that I was seeking what my parents had,
Right.
and that it's not really what I want. That's a perfect example. I wasn't trying to flex.
No. It's just, a great example.
That's a perfect example of something that I thought I wanted, and then I realized, no, it doesn't really align as much with my values as I thought it would. And maybe that will change because I was always thinking about doing farming and this kind of thing.
But it's a smart idea at the time.
At the time, it seemed like a good idea, but you know, these things change. That's the point. Your expectations change.
Yeah.
You don't. You're not, the fact that you're not going to live to the quote unquote same standards as your parents does not mean that your life is going to be worse. I think that's really important to emphasize. Your life is going to be more under your control. It's going to be more what you expect. And is your life going to be under your own control or not? I think that's much more important. Are you going to be able to make decisions? You know, when people are really, when they worry about the future, I think what they really worry about is the lack or the loss of predictability, of control.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
And if you're able to maintain control, if you're able to understand that some of those things that you value will still be there, and you can feel safe, you know?
Which I don't know if I speak for many people or hardly anybody, but I do not. In this day and age, I don't feel safe. I feel okay.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, is not good enough.
But you want, I mean, the same thing that the French revolutionaries wanted 200 years ago was for the price of bread to be tomorrow what it is today, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't change. People want predictability, and they're willing to make sacrifices for it. You know, that's clear through history. So, you know, I think that people should worry less. I try to remind myself of this. People should worry less that the material wealth will be less than it was. You know, you most
think?
Yeah. I most like, and I think about myself. I most likely have less potential for wealth in the future than today.
explain this?
Well, the ways traditionally that someone like me would gain wealth is that the things that I would own, the land or the investments, would gain value.
Yeah.
And they would gain value because of growth in the underlying economy.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that the underlying economy is going to be growing like it was. And that means the demand for land, the demand for things is not going to be as high as it was. And that means that my material wealth is going to be less. But on the other hand, you know, certain things will cost less. Certain things won't be as needed. Life will be simpler in some ways. So I won't need all that wealth, you know. But the idea that I'm going to do exactly what my parents did and the house that I bought when I was 30 is going to be worth 5 times more when I'm 60, that's not going to happen. It can't.
Why?
How could it? How could my parents buy a house in 1981, sell it for 5 times more in 2010, and then the next generation do the same thing again? That house would be worth 25 times what it was in 60 years. It's not possible.
No, I suppose, especially as like wage growth and stuff like that doesn't even exist in some places.
Exactly. Wages have not gone up in that whole time. So where is that money going to come from?
Yeah.
It's just literally, it's mathematically impossible.
Yeah.
And I think that I thought 10 years ago, I probably thought somehow that it just would, you know, because we'll figure out a way until no one cares to jigger our growth metrics to fool each other into believing that growth is still happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
or some fucking metaverse house is going to be worth billions of fucking dollars or pounds or something. This is something bullshit, made up stuff.
This is something that we're definitely going to get into in the futurism and the growth episodes.
Yeah.
The thing is, yes, I do believe that 20 years from now, it is possible that there will be trillions and trillions of dollars that are supposedly being traded in virtual housing and shit like that to keep the growth thing going, but it will be completely detached from people's actual lives.
Yeah.
And that's the point, really, that once those things just become completely academic, people actually stop caring about them, because you're never going to own some virtual land in the metaverse, nor would you ever want to.
You're gonna live there. What's the?
Well, I think that's the funniest. That's the funniest thing for me, which is like you have somebody like Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine like someone you would just, you see them from a distance and you're just like, I would never want to have a conversation with you about anything.
Yeah.
In my life, I could not imagine sitting next to him at a baseball game and saying, what kind of hot dog? I wouldn't, not because of who he is, not because of what he does, but just because he's so utterly repellent as a human being, like, and just so uninteresting. And then he's telling people, oh, you're gonna live in my multiverse, and it's like, the things that he can imagine people doing in it are like going to the office.
Yeah.
It's really fucking sad.
I mean, I don't get how he thinks it's going to work. Like, put a fucking pair of goggles on and be like in this virtual world. I mean...
Yeah, but people like him, you know, well, think about, why does he have to invent that? Because there's nothing else to grow. Think about Elon Musk, right? How do you possibly justify $1 trillion valuation for your company if not the future promise of something amazing? And then it's like when everybody suddenly offers the same thing, like electric cars, then it has to be the next thing. Now it's fucking robots. And now he's talking about a city on Mars.
That's right.
And it's like, you're not going to... First of all, that would be amazing, but it's not as if the value of one company is going to grow because of all of Mars. If we were to colonize Mars, our entire economy would change. Yeah. So the success of one company in that scheme would be literally immaterial because every company would be different. It's like, but people will invest in that because they'll listen to that story because they'll believe that growth myth. They'll buy into it, not really thinking it through. Yeah.
I mean, I wish it wasn't all bullshit from him, because if you had somebody like in this lifetime that is a bit of a dreamer and went, do you know what, we're gonna go there, not because this bullshit reason that I've got, but because, like, why the fuck not? This is gonna be great. We can just check it out. We can further ourselves.
Isn't it disappointing that the people who will do that, the people who actually will go to Mars, they're alive, and like I told you, 80% of the work has already been done at NASA.
Yeah.
And they'll send two guys who have been, or a woman and a guy, who have been working their whole life towards it.
Yeah.
And they will study soil samples for a year.
Yeah.
And they'll come back and they'll study it some more.
Yeah.
Then they'll go and they'll do that again a little bit more. And it'll just continue like that because that's reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's reality.
That's exactly how it should be, yeah.
And then maybe 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
1,000 years from now, we'll figure out how to do some shit that we can terraform, we can move people there.
Yeah.
God only knows. But the point is, it is not gonna. There's not gonna be a silver shiny dick from SpaceX that takes you to Mars in your lifetime. It's not gonna happen.
No.
It's not gonna happen because if it could happen, the world would be fundamentally different than it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to go. It would be the Jetsons.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
And it's not. It's not gonna be.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely not. No. It would be absolutely fucking boring. And then it would be the same as it is here. You have to work, and that's it.
Well, that's the reality, because then they would be, if they were on some...
You're working towards something better.
Exactly.
A better future. Then you fucking say that every day.
If they were on some Martian colony, exactly. In capitalism, if you're on some Martian colony, there'll be some guy on the Martian colony telling you, you just wait until we get to Jupiter.
Yeah.
Wait until we get to Titan, that you don't even understand, because that's the...
Yeah, this is life. This is life. This is exactly how they fucking get you.
Yeah. And there are, history is full of brief moments of flowering of human potential.
Chaos, usually.
Usually chaos. Sometimes a brief flowering of human potential. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to do, I suppose, to get back to something on topic, is that's what I want to do with 3-day weeks. I do want to flower human potential, to say, okay, you're not going to go live on Mars. You should not drive a Toyota Tundra. You cannot have 2 houses and a boat. You get video games and hanging out with friends, and eating fake meat. But you're going to enjoy it because everyone will have that, and it will be fine. It will be fine. You'll like it because you'll be in control. And I'm not telling people, I'm not telling you people like go live in a bubble and eat fake meat. Yeah. What I'm saying is that you will eventually probably live in a bubble and eat fake meat. Yeah. And the thing is, if you work now on achieving the things that are important to being comfortable in that situation, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree.
And you will be happy in your bubble with your meat. I forgot in the first few episodes that I have a couple sponsorship reads already. We haven't even aired the show, and we've already attracted sponsors. Kurt, first sponsor, Raytheon.
Hello.
Whether you're using lasers from space to pick up sound waves and decode speech, or crashing a wedding in Hyderabad with a knife missile, Raytheon cuts through the red tape. Choose Raytheon. Next one, exciting sponsor, the Chinese Communist Party. Communists who want to practice hypercapitalism and 20th century style colonialism in Africa choose the CCP. Non-Uyghur Chinese agree the CCP is where to be. One more. Keep it together.
Thank you.
The Russian army. If you're anything like us, you're dead tired of a people's sovereign right to national self-determination. That's why we're sponsored by the Russian army, dedicated to stamping out the organic rise of enlightened democracies for over 30 years. Choose the Russian army. Thank you to our sponsors.
Thank you for this.